Hello everyone, welcome back to another story expanding on this ever-growing world of Noctovia. There are some stories here that I can tell all at once. There are some that will need more than one sitting to fully disclose. This time I would consider this a mix of both of these. It's a moment that can be discussed at once, yet it's a fraction of a long life that we may need to revisit again later. So for now we turn our eyes to the age where empires were at their peak and information had been plentiful. Yet of those we watch, only one is of that time. Only one of them had been a child in such splendour, and the other more from a time before. Before what? Well, I doubt even she would know how to phrase that. It's simply before. That for now is enough though. They are getting closer to their destination. It only shows how long it's been since Briar has visited this part of her local area. She's heard Asta talking at length about nearby developments and how the villages nearby turning to towns is great for her archive, especially when it comes to acquiring new material. Those sorts of conversations have been plentiful for quite some time now, and Asta has been making more and more rare trips out to gather sources she's heard of. And that's from both near and far. Not to mention the rise in the strange offerings being left at the Archives Island in the more recent years. They may have begun shortly after the balloon had been invented, yet only have increased in the frequency these years. But this much change to the area so quickly is almost ridiculous. The last time she set foot in this place, it had been a tiny village surrounded by expansive farmland that most of the families tended to. To call it a village might have been generous, as it was a handful of people who could recite the name of all their neighbours and the relatives of those neighbours too. By the end of Briar's prior stay, it was custom that the villagers' children travelled to find a partner, as the options in town were either far too old for common sense, or simply unappealing as they held relatives somewhere in the lineage. Some returned once they found a partner, settling down to have their family where they grew up from sentiment alone. Yet most followed sense, and left to never come back as elsewhere made them promises of community, excitement and work. The village was declining. The remaining residents grew older by the year, and slowly the houses, as few as they were, had been gradually growing empty when she came to leave too. The fields were left empty or overgrown, as the harvest slowed down. Crops gave less, and people couldn't tend to the larger scale that they once celebrated or traded. She left knowing the fate that would soon befall the inhabitants. From experience, she expected the village to fall into obscurity after a handful of years from her leaving, as the inhabitants were vulnerable. Creatures of the forest would have had easy prey when the last of their hunters fell to foe or age. None of them would have really stood a chance against nature coming in. Yet now the whispers have sprouted this. The once dusty streets are now paved over with smooth enough stones to actually accommodate 2 carriages in passing. Before, she recalls watching a merchant almost get stuck on his way into the village's market during her first few years in the village, since his cart was nearly wider than the road. He knocked into the baker's table outside their home, and the stock on display had almost been ruined that day. Now she instead watches out of the window, as a terribly gaudy carriage passes them by, with their decorated horses following the driver's wish without much of a fuss. No one needs that much gold at the trims of their transport, as it only screams for them to be a target on the main road. She will have to watch the gossip mill when that family is making their return to the capital of the most recent empire. Maybe such news would make it this far with the improved development of those networks as well. She had barely realised some mutterings were actually seeds from the capital when she first entered her more recent agreement. Yet it still proves entertaining. "Tell me again why I had to accommodate you here today," she requests from the man sitting across from her. She knows him well enough, and spent a fair bit of time around him. Yet he never thought to warn her of such a trip he'd insisted she join him for. It isn't that she hates the towns and the cities nearby, but their names change too often, and she gets a funny glance from a local if she uses the name from another lifetime. not to mention all of the people pushing and shoving to get to where they want to be. The old villages were far more enjoyable. The crowds were thin, and the people would stop for a conversation if you smiled at them in passing. It may have got repetitive to discuss the weather and the local news, but sometimes the local gossip would provide something special. Perhaps a scandal would be shared, or rumours about local creatures and concerns. Instead, the cities look on in suspicion, whilst thinking themselves welcoming. They don't see how tourists and guests keep to themselves, or how the residents don't know the names of their neighbours. No one would go out of their way for a stranger, or stop to think about the lives that surround them. In the cities she's visited in the past, those she knew were cities from memory, even the rumours were seeking another's failure or misfortune. They preyed on the misery of those around to distract them from the mundane. It's rare these days to find a rumour that wishes well of others if true. The nobility are still in the area, and there were whispers at the dinner how rarely we are seen together in public. They say my eyes are wandering, that you are plotting or unwell. Some go as far as to say that I'm plotting to harm you. Whilst the scraps of the nobles remain, it would be good to quell this gossip. Briar hums, a gaze turning back to the window as there is little point in argument. She supposes that this partner isn't the worst she's ever had. There are certainly worse memories, and this lifetime could be far more intolerable if he had shared the attitude some of his peers hold. It's rare that he will force her to these shows and appearances, and more often than not will simply let her continue on in whatever it is she wants to do. Since he found out that she enjoys painting, he's dedicated a part of the house to her craft, with instructions to their staff that it should never run out of supply. Still, they travel through the bustling streets with the outside noise seeping in through the thin walls of their carriage. Shouts call out over the crowds as businesses attempt to draw in customers to their shops and stalls that line these roads. It's not like many would succeed. The ones here are outside of the official market, and the lack of backing trader organisations and merchant groups that are set to handle the quality of the Empire's goods. They may be a small corner of Tadiv, yet those groups are not to be taken lightly. There is more than one reason that such groups are spared part of the Empire's guard upon request. Very well. If that is the case, then I want to stop by the bookseller's stand at the very least. From there, I can't quite find myself to care much for any other we go to. Briar establishes, with a glance out of the window settling her eye on a couple looking at some overpriced accessories still outside of the market itself. The cart in front of them has stopped for something she can't quite see yet. It's another reason she still favours this partner over others of those in the past. Upon hearing of her sensitivity to the light, amongst other things, he had his carriage updated to possess fine arts of stained glass in the windows to minimise the exposures and provide her with some privacy on the road. He fitted dark curtains over the top for the worst of her days, and is rather good at keeping her needs in mind whilst recalling the need for secrecy. I had thought as much. We can make it our main stop if you like. I only intended to wander, as it is. Conversation lulls for a moment as the pair listens to the shouts from outside. The gist is simple. The cart in front had some goods fall loose and are working to fix their problem. There is still apt space for them to get around the matter if another is to let them, which occurs a moment later when they jolt into motion once again. They aren't too far away from now as it is. Their carriage pulls to a stop some moments later as they arrive, proving Briar's theory right. The market itself is set up in the city centre, stalls tightly packed into the main plaza that rests outside of the old shrine. It's the new old shrine if people actually cared for the area's history, however. To her best estimate, it doesn't sit where the village's original one had all those years ago, which would have been the true oldest shrine the town could have boasted of. That would be a few streets over, where they've since removed all traces of it in favour of this old shrine. In truth, it looks fairly new to her, being made out of stone as it is. Yes, new is relative. The style is from a few lifetimes ago at best, and these stone carvings are only slightly worn by the weather and time. Though it's still a bit of a near insult to call it old, as things have barely begun to discolour, and most of the weeds or moss have been removed. Any truly old shrine had been a structure made of wood, or some other cheap material mixture used more commonly as a community space, rather than this towering, stone brick structure with a bell tower tall enough to block out the morning sun. This shrine is the second one to the area, not the first, so it's simply the new old shrine. Locals call the one across town the new shrine, which is held as a masterpiece of their work, as most of the local greats contributed to it. Another reason the people here would stare at her, Briar supposes to herself as she steps down from the carriage with the aid Arthur offers her. Her short heels click against the paved walkways at every step, as the sound only carries into the sound of the passing crowds. Some groups of strangers push past each other, as others stand slightly to the side, their eyes scanning the crowds for anything entertaining or profitable. After all, some groups are simply of all ages, as they meet friends or family. Others are children shouting over the cacophony that will only grow worse the more the day continues to progress. Some of the groups aren't so kind. They instead search the square with a cunning or nervous glint, scanning for someone who looks wealthy enough to not notice any lighter pockets. Arthur breaks her pause with an arm offered for her to take. Shall we? I suppose we didn't come here to stand all day. Where is the bookseller? He smiles, laughing slightly to himself as the pair make their way into the crowds. Truly, he tried his best to pick the quietest day and time to make this trip. They are meant to be seen, which would normally mean a crowd would have been a good thing in terms of goals. But rumours have a way of spreading with only a handful to know them. Normally, half of these people would not be here. He's had staffs tracking the activity for weeks, visited himself at random days leading up to this, before ever telling her of the visit. Yet it seems luck is against the pairing today. She doesn't appear to mind too much at the very least, yet he guides them both into the crowds as he's more familiar with the yelling and the calls, the people pushing past and those attempting to bargain with the wrong vendors. Unexpected shouts are a thing he's learnt to neglect in his years of youth that were spent browsing these tables to pass the time. It was at a table in the far corner where he found the jacket he currently wears, and that was about 3 years ago. It's long, falling to the back of his knee, and it's of the warmer options, and the family running the stall have always delivered promises of quality. They now hold a shop towards the city centre, where most of their best stock remains, though they make a point of their stall remaining affordable for the average resident. He's gone there for many of Briar's new addresses, or if he ever requires something himself. The bookseller is often near the middle of the market. Their stall comes and goes. It is currently being present as the vendor recently returned from a travel. Yet their plot at the market scarcely moves. It sits between those for accessories and perfumes or things considered luxury, after a rather unforgettable instance of the past. That was when the bookseller was nearer to the food stalls or produce, and some of his wares got ruined and stained by uncautious shoppers. Yet the pair weave through the healthy crowd. He's seen it busier, he can currently step without having to shuffle against those ahead, and there isn't anyone pushing from behind. They have to weave, wrap between the groups carelessly occupying most of the generous walkway, though there are still spaces enough for them to breathe. It's easy to forget what Briar is used to, easy to forget what he's never known. A market to him is this, the rows of stalls where people sell the same thing and fight for customers. Yes, only one may sell books, as only one company or family wants to source them for such an environment. Most would instead opt for a special shop or permanent location away from here, where customers can browse in peace. Yet there are many stalls selling their produce, as many come from outside the city wall to offer such goods. Many offer accessories or cheap cloth and fabric, Again, a lot of these products would do best in a small shop, and many of those holding a stall here for luxury items will usually do so with a sign on the stall guiding to their main store. They pass one where the front sign is a map alone, as the table is scattered with fine yet decorative blades and weapons. None of them are sharp enough to do harm, and the sign openly promises that the metal used isn't intended for conflict. Yet the map is to the main forge, where the true weapons are sold and licensed. Markets like this aren't permitted to sell real weapons after all, so it makes sense to him. He's never seen a table with real live weapons. He hears slightly as Briar scoffs. What need would someone have in this world for a fake blade, meant not for sharpening and designed to snap? She's no stranger to those stalls carrying blunted weapons not yet sharpened properly, or to full potential as of yet. However, the maker is meant to run the stall and sharpen it on purpose. At the very least, reserve it with half payment and decide a day for pickup so the blade can be refined. Yet, she trusts Arthur to guide them as they continue to weave past stalls of little to no interest to her. In truth, all of it is of no interest to her. She has her belongings in her space of the archive, with some being far greater quality than anything on display. Other items are perhaps of lower value, yet carry far greater meaning to both history and her. What she doesn't have at Arthur's estate, he will easily get for her, like the more recent fashions and finery. Finally, they see the pale green tablecloth, where the standing sign denotes an open book. Despite the rise in cities, literacy rates could still be improved upon, as not all will have the time to learn as she had. Well, they also won't have the resources of the archive ensuring she's up to date on the most ongoings. Either way, she smiles softly to herself as they both approach the table stacked with books. Arthur scans through the barrels to the side, opening them up to look for anything unknown in the scrolls that may pique Briar's interest, or be of any value to the archive that already holds so much. Most look the same from the outside, though the tags on the scrolls do help his search somewhat. It's Briar who begins scanning over the plain covers, hoping that something will make this trip worth it. It takes a few minutes before Arthur realises that Briar has fallen silent. She's very often muttering to herself when browsing in a store, reasoning out her interest or remarking under her breath on the quality over time. He has to admit to himself it's entertaining when she never realises she does it. More often than not, she reveals glances at a history most forget, whether she's remarking over material changing or the price of a certain good. Yet now she's silent. "What have you found?" Arthur asks over Briar's shoulder. He tries to avoid it, yet the crowds behind him continue to flow, which sort of push him a bit closer towards her. They are for now the only ones at this stall for the moment, so there isn't anyone to really mind if they block most of it. She flicks instead briefly through a plain book. It's simple, basic fabric cover with a name etched onto the cover and the spine. For a moment, most may mistake it for some kind of private record, like a journal or a diary accidentally thrown into the table's supply. Yet it isn't. It instead is marked, rather strangely, as time magic, where no such thing is to yet exist. The system as it is now has been established for years, and those years were before Arthur was born, and they were adamant that no other category would be needed or would fit into this web. 6 even and balanced elements worked, and it seemed as if each element had an opposite to fit into the web with. Yet now they propose something new, such as time? What could even come to oppose that as a balance, and would it even need such a balance? They have a lot of new material. The written history is supposedly from Akilse, and the most recent contact made with them. However true it is may yet to be seen, though it will interest Asta for the time being all the same. No doubt it may encourage them to make a trip to the communities there themselves if they would welcome her. The other is writings from Mayod. A scholar is said to have discovered a new classification of magic within the world. Arthur isn't the best at reading Briar's expressions. He usually guesses to try his best, as she isn't the most expressive at the best of times. Yet there's something about the way her mouth pulls into a subtle grimace that seems more than just this. There's something left unsaid. Perhaps she is simply displeased with another change pulling the world further from what she knows? He can't exactly guess. There's more going on in her mind than he would ever dare to assume. Oh? The system at the moment has been quite stable for years, seeing light and dark's introductions. It seems odd to introduce a seventh after so long. Yes, well, we thought the system was stable based on the original 4. Not to mention that some kingdoms back then didn't recognise magic at all. They instead decided to criminalise it, remarking that it was a thing for the beasts and nothing else. To the vendor, it will pass as an interest in history. They look wealthy, which is enough for them to not pry too deep or question too much how they know this. Education from the best covers the development of magic, the research and scholarly opinions that go on, and have gone into it. The history of denying magic is less known. He's only learnt passing remarks or comments on attitudes back then and the implications of them. Yet the man behind the stall doesn't ask, merely smiles slightly at Arthur's glance. Briar sighs to herself, watching them both as she otherwise scans the book in her hand. He too will learn that people question far less when you act as if it's normal. If they do, then she has lies of years worth prepared. I suppose you'll be correct. What is the classification anyway? Time. Briar returns with a slight smile as she shows him the cover once more. He definitely knew that it said time, he'd snuck a glance and he knew this. Yet it seems that she will talk about it if he asks. Asta will certainly want this. She has some old scorched notes from the past where, lifetimes ago, someone had these very same conclusions. It was long before light and dark had been recognised formally as well. Perhaps if he'd furthered his research, we would have this knowledge sooner. I'll buy them for you. Pick what you wish for. The vendor then cares, turning back to the couple with a smile growing wider as he promotes the book in her hand as a smart choice for those well informed. He suggests the histories she mentioned, and they do end up bagging them as well. They're scrolls compared to bound books, making them far cheaper, and there are many in the set. Alongside it, they pick up some loose books on theories and things that the archive may lack, as it is Asta's pride to have one of the largest collections in the world. If the knowledge in these books is incorrect or outdated, then it will simply be filed away as such. Never once does Arthur complain though, only encouraged as he notes more topics that move away from magic. One is a series of publications from various researchers looking into disease and illness, suggesting various ways that they affect the body. They leave with at least 3 books, and the collection of scrolls much to the man's delight. He waves them off, inviting them back with the offer to bring back more materials for them on these chosen topics. He will as well. On his next journey he will keep an eye out for the magic theory books, or any with themes of history and new developments. It's the one way Arthur will ever convince Briar to the market with him, though for now the couple follow their path back towards the carriage. By no means has it been a long outing. If anything, they've been here half an hour at most, and then spent more time travelling to the market with their estate being outside the wall. Yet the sun is crawling higher in the sky, and it slowly grows beyond where the tower can block. It can't kill Briar, not quite, yet she would still rather avoid all the issues that she may. Minutes later, bags in hand, they're climbing back into the dark carriage and closing the door behind them. The driver pulls away, the box jerking into motion again, as Briar sits flicking through the book published that announces such a large discovery, shifting most of the others in their field. Many others in Asta's collection are bundles of papers regarding similar topics or multiple views on a single study, that kind of make it worth binding all together, such as the one that Briar's picked up of disease. It's no one single author. Others are then piles of papers that Asta herself clipped together to file away, as the researchers sent them directly to her, proud at the idea of their findings being held in such an archive, especially if they're aware of Asta's goal. Others don't always realise Asta gets a copy, the agreement with Tadiv coming into play, as those don't always know of the archive's intent. Regardless, the book in her hand differs. It compiles copies of other theories and studies before the publisher goes through to respond to them and justify their theory over it. Evidence resides in the pages to indicate it is more likely and more plausible than the other whispers that imply they should reallocate magic into existing categories, changing the title of light and dark if needed. It will still need to go through far more lengths of testing, and there will be areas of magic assigned strictly to the idea of time. Yet the argument in the book alone is worth keeping a copy of. It may very well be the first instance that it gets believed. So she sits, flicking through the pages, reading partial sections here and there. Most of the mutterings sound almost familiar, kind of like they echo from long before. You're interested in the concept of time tying into magic. Should I be concerned? Arthur doesn't mean it, speaking with a smile and a slight laugh. Though it is rare that Briar grows so engrossed in anything, as, well, most of the time she's more than familiar with things. She lived through the previous discoveries of light and then later dark. He wonders distantly if those revelations gripped her as much as this. After all, she's barely put the book down since picking it up, and she never even thought to put it in the bag with the rest. The rest, mind you, sitting on the floor between them. Concerned? No. I've had my guess for years based on the way I am. The man I told you about, the one with the old theory and scorched notes. I knew him well before this era of my life. Arthur almost comes to hold his breath. He understands. Someone like Briar will live and see things that he can barely comprehend. She already has seen more than he ever will, and could ever hope to see, as she knows more than any other alive at this moment. All around her are temporary. They always will be, with a single moment of a longer tale, and he is barely going to be another line in that tale. She doesn't mention her past, unless it's disconnected from her. What was it like when Tadiv first came to rise? What was it like seeing the first balloon developed from air magic? She will answer about history, give fragments of forgotten knowledge when it comes to other matters too. Things like how they used to cure a cold or get a stain out of clothing. Those are all open matters. He's noticed a spark will return to her whenever she can talk of those eras freely, without someone challenging her as well. He sees it when she is teaching musicians forgotten songs on the instruments they play, just so that she can hope to hear it once again. The group playing as she hummed a tune stuck in her head after so long. Anything personal is slightly different. They're not truly forbidden, but they're not to be asked lightly about. And you would have to ask. She never offers such details so freely, and she keeps to her principles. It's rare you speak so openly of the times before. It's rare that I speak of him at all. There is a small smile at the corner of her mouth, though it holds no joy. It's a look she often develops during the depths of the night, while he's awoken by her movement and insists on keeping her company. In the dark of the carriage, it looked close to the expression in the market, though still unreadable as to what she truly thinks. Even those deep and dark nights are hard to read so simply. May I ask you who he was to you? He doesn't know what response he will get. She may remain silent until home before shutting herself in the art studio once more, working hours away on new portraits of faces he's never once seen. She may snap, remind him not to pry, as if it truly is none of his concern. Even if the man of the past was close to her, and she is close to him now. The man before will be long gone, and Arthur truly has no place to be jealous or anything. Their marriage wasn't of love. It was one bound by terms and conditions where both parties stood to gain from it. For all he knows, he is needlessly opening old wounds of hers that may be best left closed by the ache of time. Part of him doesn't truly know why he asked. My first husband. We married when I was 22 and him 23. Asta was actually at our wedding. They handled a lot of planning with us, actually made it a reality. Then, on the actual day, they had to find me a nice dress at the last minute from a neighbour, especially since my old one had been ruined by an accident. Arthur does the math. At least he tries to. Briar's age is a secret in of itself. Whether she remembers it or not is an entirely other question. Yet he has caught subtle hints here and there from the event she's referred to. She is from before Tavid and the Empire, though maybe not before the Kingdom of Tavid. That is hard to make clear, especially when this area was nowhere near that old kingdom. It's before light and dark magic, maybe around the early understandings of the original four though. Again, he can't be sure if that was a set theory when she was young, or if it was a local agreement. That must have been ages then. And he thought of time magic himself. Well, he thought of the areas they were assigning to time, yes, though he never thought of that name for it. He called it soul or life, tied it more to those aspects than that of time. Besides, he didn't just research time. If he had only a few more months, he would have been credited for the discovery of dark magic, if you ask me. Instead, it was almost 150 years later that it was published as a theory in response to the light that came out 10 years before that paper. He must have been a smart man. Her smile is genuine if not strained. Briar knows that, but knows that her current husband can't exactly read it. Asta would know in a heartbeat. Or what should be one? That isn't fun to recall everything of those details. Some other parts are fun for her to recall. Her first husband's mind was truly something ahead of its time, and she never truly appreciated that in the past. It wasn't something she truly appreciated until many, many years later. Yet she never thought that something from his own theories, something that he centered so much of his life on, time, would echo to this day. Eccentric, he knew to doubt the active magic system since he observed things that didn't add up to his logic, but he didn't think for a moment to decline requests asking him to mix early fire crystals, a technology relatively new to our past, and the early version of what is now gunpowder. Both of those back then were terribly unstable. There is a silence. The man still as he seems to piece together a story or five. Judging by the way his face subtly shifts and tilts nearer and nearer to horror, Briar believes he is forming more and more by the moment. There are the marks that will never fade along her body. The burns her body will simply leave as scars on her skin and heal no further from. How, despite the capacity to use most areas of magic these days, she will rarely touch fire without a good cause. There are hints, implications that make sense with the context. May I ask? I would prefer it if you didn't just yet. With time you will be given the full and true tale. Yet know that my husband before you had been the second soul told of that truth, and the first before him had been Asta upon its happening. They had to have known so that they could tell me and explain the most likely situation. Very well. Do you have any preference for this afternoon's events? Arthur instead directs to. The wheels outside keep turning. The conversation switches to lighter topics inside as the bustle of the city fades to the birds singing outside, or to the rustle of leaves along the path. They both make their plans, arrange their time together, yet also plan their time apart to suit each other as needed. Rumours will do their work, say that they were seen together and getting along just fine without either seeing a need to argue. The days will keep turning as the book in her hand sits heavy when compared to most. It's not her concern at the moment.